Hello there. Welcome to the Agoners YouTube channel. This is Remy77077, of course, and I'm going to do another battle report for the Ninth Age. We are going to be playing Essence of War once again on Tabletop Simulator. If none of that makes any sense to you, go over to my blog site. You can read a written battle report where I go into a lot of details about what all that means, or you could watch my last video where I also explain a little bit about that. Right, so we will be doing something a little bit new, however, though, because I didn't actually play in this game, as you can see. So yeah, this is going to be something a bit weird. I'm going to report on some other people's battles rather than my own. So let's see how this goes. A bit of a test run for this. This game was played live on Twitch, as you can see, at Veil of the Ages. I didn't mention him enough in the last video. This is all hosted by Veil of the Ages. This is his mod. So yeah, and his Twitch channel. Do give him a follow on there, and you can watch all these games live. And I watched this one live actually, so it's pretty fun to watch. Because these games are quite quick, it's not quite a big onerous undertaking that it can be to watch a tabletop war game played digitally like this in some situations. So the two opponents here, we had someone playing orcs and goblins, as you can see by this beautiful symbol here, and it was the very famous Hyper G from Proxy Table Gaming. Now, if you don't know who Proxy Table Gaming are, they are some pretty big YouTubers in the world of the Ninth Age, also from the UK. So yeah, I hope to meet these guys one day in a non-lockdown lifetime. We'll see if that one ever happens. We never know. But yeah, PTG-Hyper G. If you don't say, go and watch their channel. They do lots of battle reports and other features. Really good stuff. Been watching them for a couple of years now, actually, since I discovered the Ninth Age. So really good guys. Give them lots of support. His opponent for this one would be RHWorldbuilding, who you might remember I played before. This time he is playing a new roster, though, a new patrol for the Essence of War that we've just introduced, called the Empire of Sonstal, who are also another human faction, and I'll take you a little bit through these patrols right now. So yeah, this is the Orc one, which we did see before. Now, again, I don't have the full PDF army list yet because we haven't made them yet. But I'll show you some of the stats from this is taken from a screenshot from Pateo's inside his mod from Veil of the Ages. So yeah, what the orcs, as we mentioned before, they do have a shaman as he is their general, and he's quite important actually because he's got a nice discipline 8 here, and all your low discipline goblins and orcs can look to him for his brave leadership, and it's quite useful. Um, and yeah, the only thing you don't see on these cards, because these are the in-game helper cards, so they have the spells and they have some nice artwork here. And this artwork is by Rob, RHWorldbuilding, of course, so pretty good stuff to see. He's also contributed a lot to this as well as playing it. um, so yeah, it doesn't show the numbers of the units because of course they'd be on the tabletop, so you wouldn't need that on these reminder cards. But yeah, there are 20 orcs, 20 goblins, and 5 goblin raiders and 1 orc shaman. So yeah, very numerous sort of horde army. This one, I mean, none of these large armies. This is for Essence of War patrols. So yeah, they're fairly small games, of course, but there's still a lot of models on the table, like 45 dudes on the table for the 46, if potentially, if the shaman's on his own. So yeah, very beefy army here. The goblins do have some bows, if you recall, and the raiders a little bit very fast, but pretty weak. And the spells, the orcs have a buff spell called Awaken the Beast, which they can use on one of their own units to make them stronger, basically, better strength, better armor penetration. They also have a ranged attack, which is a fireball. And both these spells pretty easy to cast, so depending on the magic rolls and things, they might want to get cheeky and try and do 2 spells a turn at times. The Empire of Sonstal list, there's 1 wizard, as we've seen. Most of the lists have 1 spellcaster. He is the general, but actually, if you look at it, his discipline's only 7, and all these guys are at least 7 or 8. So you can ignore the fact he's the general for the most part. Really, he's essentially just there as a wizard, but technically he is the general as well. One thing to note: the Orc Shaman isn't too bad at fighting, by the way. 3 attacks, offensive skill 4, strength 4, AP 1. So he's not awful. Whereas this guy, like most wizards, doesn't really do very much in combat. He's just there for casting. We will mention his spells though, because Scorching Salvo is a particularly powerful spell in the Essence of War world. because it hits all enemy units that aren't engaged within 18 inches of him. Doesn't even need line of sight, and they don't take that many hits, but that's quite scary for some of the units. I'll go into a bit more of that. Corruption of Tin, however, reduces the enemy's armor. Now, the Orc and Goblin list does have a little bit of armor. Only 2 armors on those and 3 armors, but nothing that's really high armor that like Corruption of Tin really, really helps against particularly. So it's got a long range though. Again, doesn't need line of sight. So this wizard can probably help. He's quite good at just hiding, hiding and casting his spells anyway. So the fact he's not a great fighter, probably doesn't matter, especially since you don't need him for being the general. Whereas the orc shaman probably has to get involved a little bit more because he is important for the discipline, as we said earlier. So the one wizard, there's 10 light infantry. Um, 5 electoral cavalry and 15 imperial guard, and I'll just mention what these guys are. So the light infantry, there's 10 of them. As I say, they've got handguns, so these are reasonable range, 24-inch. Not the best at hitting. They only hit on a 4+, and that's at the best of times. Obviously, cover and long range and things will reduce that. But they are very powerful. Strength 4, armor penetration 2. So pretty scary for all of the Orc and Goblin units that potentially can do a bit of damage there. Um, and particularly combined with the Scorching Salvo spell. The thing that this makes quite a tricky thing, I've often whined about the Goblin Raiders, although I managed to get them into pretty good use in some of my previous battles, if you've read them and watched them. The Goblin Raiders can be very vulnerable to missile attacks, though, and you've got to be very careful, especially against a list like this, which has a damaging spell and some very damaging missile fire, which is very scary for those Goblin Raiders. They don't like being shot up or fireballed, that's for sure. And the Electoral Cavalry are a bit of an odd unit. They've got incredibly good armor 5, but they're not actually that great at fighting. They only have 1 attack each. There's only 5 of them. Um, and they actually got, you might notice they've got agility 0 here and strength 5, so they've got great weapons essentially, very slow to strike. So they're kind of like some of the cavalry we saw in the previous game that the other human faction had. But they're a little bit slower, so they're not really that great. They're a hard unit to use well, I think, in Essence of War. A bit much like the Goblin Raiders. They're a little bit like them in the fact that you can't really count on them to do much damage, but you can count on them for a bit of maneuverability. And these guys have a very well protected, let's say, very, very big armor. The Imperial Guard as well. There's 15 of these, so they're not hugely numerous as well. But these guys are pretty rock hard. They've only got 1 attack each, but again, defense 5, armor 4. Pretty tough tin cans. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can go toe to toe with any of the Orc and Goblin units in this battle. And let's get on to the battle. I think I've spoken enough about this preamble. This was the setup. Now, if I remember correctly, PTG-Hyper G did in fact win the roll-off and chose this side and chose to deployed like this. And then Rob RHWorldbuilding counter deployed like this. Now, it was a very very relaxed and friendly game. I have to say, it was really fun to watch. These two guys obviously they were taking it seriously, but they weren't getting too serious about it. They're having a really nice time, so it was really enjoyable to watch. But yeah, I do think maybe they might have been a bit too relaxed, and hopefully I'm not be hypercritical here. But if you're going to report on someone else's battle, then you've got to throw something else in there to. Otherwise, it'd be a bit boring if I just, told you what they did. I'm going to make my commentary on it. So, as I want to do, yes, I was very surprised that Hyper-G chose this side to set up on. You've already got quite a lot of guys to try and get fit on the board with Orcs and Goblins, as we mentioned earlier. But particularly, I always think about what can my Goblin Raiders do, and by putting them out on this side, I suppose he's hoping to draw off some of the Empire forces, perhaps to try and deal with them. But there's not really a way they can maneuver around this wood very easily. I mean, maybe if you put them right on the edge, maybe there'd be a route through there. But I don't think that gap's big enough for them to get through without taking tests from going through the terrain. If they want to go fast, they can obviously go slowly and be safe from that. But yeah, I really think that if you flip this board and you look at how Rob has set up on this side, if the Orcs had set up a bit like this, so if you imagine this Electoral Cavalry was in actual fact Goblin Raiders, this is a great spot for Goblin Raiders to be in. It's not a bad spot for electoral cavalry, but particularly Goblin Raiders want to be somewhere like this because they want to be able to hang back and move up, but stay out of sight. So yeah, these woods, okay, they do give you cover, but you can still be seen through them. It's only modifiers to hit. It doesn't stop people shooting at them. And obviously the scorching salvo. I mean, the good news is the wizard's a long way away from them, so they're less likely to get scorching salvoed. But we'll see how this one plays out. I do generally think if I'd had the choice of side, definitely would have picked this side if I was the Orcs to give myself more space to maneuver. Um, I suppose there's a bit more cover over this side, maybe, but yeah, I don't know how I would have deployed as the Orcs. But yeah, definitely my Raiders down here would have been something to think about because then the only great counter unit for them is the handgunners, the light infantry with the handguns. So I like how Rob's deployed them against that. Um, but yeah, he's got to play a bit of a waiting game in the middle here because both these big blocks are coming in, and his Imperial Guard are kind of offset here. Um, the Imperial Guard might win against the Orcs in a charge if they win the charge. If the Orcs charge them, they're probably not going to win. And also because there's more Orcs, they're more likely to have the steadfast. So they're more likely. Basically, it's harder to break a unit that's got more ranks than you. So because you can't lower the discipline enough. So yeah, I kind of fancy the Orcs' chances there in that battle normally. Whereas the Imperial Guard should beat up the Goblins pretty well. But again, they might end up steadfast if he's not careful. So the Empire Force is a very mixed arms force, and it does have some pretty good ranged abilities. But then that's to their detriment. Their combat abilities aren't that high because of the fact they have this range power. So they kind of have to they have to kind of use all their abilities in unison to really make them work. Which I think matches maybe how they play in the Fantasy Battles game, the full game of Ninth Age as well. But yeah, maybe a little bit trickier to play than some of the other patrols that we've seen before. But we'll see how these two get on. So that was the deployment, and of course, PTG-Hyper G does have the first turn, having set up and deployed first. And there's another nice shot of his deployment there, looking lovely. Here's again Rob's RHWorldbuilding's little artwork here, very, very tasty. Particularly like these orcs, actually. We need goblins with bows, though, and these actually you could tell these were designed quite a while ago for maybe the old quick starter because the weaponry and things on these aren't quite matching what the but again, it doesn't matter too much. It's Essence of War. It's not meant to be a strict like what you see is what you get kind of game. Even if you're playing with real models, it's meant to be just you got orcs, you got goblins, you got goblin raiders. You can kind of use anything you like for them. Um, so yeah, that's another shot of them, another shot of the Empire Sun style. Let's go, round one, ding ding. So what Hyper-G does here, he moves up pretty slowly with all of his forces. Now, the reason to not go fast, of course, with the Raiders is he doesn't want to take a terrain test. So he's already been hamstrung a little bit by his own deployment, just edges up. The Goblins only move forward 4, which makes sense because they want to shoot their bows. Although, to be honest, moving and shooting at long range with goblins, yeah, is it worth it? And again, the orcs only move up 4 to keep with them. That's another one I was a bit surprised. I was kind of like, well, I move and shoot, especially at long range with goblins, is barely worth considering. It's normally better, I find, to just either march and then try and get in the position you want to be. But maybe he's deliberately playing it cagey here because he wants the Empire to have to come to him a little bit. But again, Empire with the range advantage, I generally feel like the Orcs have to press in a little bit harder than this. Um, but yeah, that's what I choose to do. Also, these units are just 1 inch apart, but they're so close, it's a little bit tricky. Um, One thing, yeah, so it makes it difficult to wheel and move away from each other even because they're so closely positioned. Because if you remember, you've got to end up 1 inch away from your own units as well, just to keep the unit spacing clear and things like that. But you can get into sticky situations if you kind of got your guys too close together. It can make it a little bit hard to maneuver. So I'm not too sure I like that as well. And also you've got the threat of panic, of course. But everyone is keeping close to the generals, so that's the nice thing. So the general, sorry, I didn't mention this. The Orc Shaman decided to deploy in the unit, which I think is probably right because, as we mentioned, the missile firepower of the Empire Force, nothing to be trifled with. The scorching salvo from this wizard could potentially do a bit of damage to this shaman. And again, because he doesn't need to see him, just needs to get within range. Pretty hard to hide from that. And also the handgunners, they could pick him off as well. So by putting him in the unit, he's protected from all of that because the unit can be shot and not him. So yeah, decent. I think that's pretty good. And again, as we said, he's not a bad fighter, so putting him in the front rank isn't too much of a loss. Um, and you would have gained one more orc by not putting him in there. But yeah, I think overall, it unbalanced, good decision there from Hyper G. So there we go. On to the first magic phase. I think it was 5 dice to 4. I can't remember all of these exactly. Hyper G immediately decides that the orcish thing to do is to 5 dice spells all the time. And that's exactly what he does. And it's failed to dispel. You can see the rolls down here if you look really closely. But yeah, so he 5 dice versus 4, and you got the advantage there. He does successfully fireball, and the fireball was targeted actually at the directly at the wizard. And if we can just see, there is a line of sight here from the Orc Shaman all the way in. So that's quite a cool maneuver there, just poking his little eyes out around the side of that hill there. And yeah, gets him. Rolls, only roll. I think he rolled a couple of hits from what I remember. Yeah, I think it was maybe 3 hits. But only 1 wound. So, but yeah, that was a bit risky to be honest for this wizard. This Max, I believe his name is. I think that's officially his name now. Yeah, a little bit of a hairy situation there. Could have got his beard got burnt pretty badly, despite the powers of fireball, well, different spells he's got. But yeah, gets away with that one. But 1 wound still a bit iffy because obviously, even though your wizards can sort of soak up a little bit of damage, if they get low on wounds, it becomes more risky to cast spells because they can do miscasts and they can kill themselves. So, still a good step one there. We also get some shooting. The goblins wanted to shoot against the light infantry with the handguns, which would be the ideal target, but unfortunately they are in the wood, meaning they're actually impossible to hit at that range. So Rob instead's to fire at the next best thing, which is the Imperial Guard, and gets Hyper G decides to fire at the Rob's Imperial Guard. Does actually kill one. So that's some pretty successful goblin shooting on the first turn. I seem to recall that RHWorldbuilding had some very bad armor save rolls on that one. I think he got through a couple of wounds and failed one of the armor saves, even though they were 3 up. So pretty unlucky there. But you know, one guy isn't going to make too much difference, you'd hope, at this stage of the battle. But the way Essence of War is designed, actually, it's the size of the units and the way the rules work. It's actually been quite carefully tuned so that kind of every hit can count a lot of the time. So that's kind of one of our goals there with it. So there we are at the end of it. And to Rob's turn 1. So RHWorldbuilding off here. Let's see what he does. He just swings around the line like that. So again, another cagey short, like not much movement going on here, guys. Just kind of looking at each other on turn 1, just like getting a feel for this battle thing. Moves the wizard up here. This is brilliant, right? This is the ideal position really for this wizard because he's behind that hill, so he cannot be seen. I mean, there is an angle eventually maybe like here where you could probably see him, right? But he's essentially can't be charged by the goblins or the orcs. He can't be fireballed again, so the fact he's lost 1 hit point probably doesn't matter very much anymore. And yeah, because none of his spells need line of sight, he's quite happy to sit there, and his general range doesn't really matter. So yeah, that's the sort of spot where like I don't know, it's just such a great spot for the Empire Wizard to be in there. And almost again, if the orcs are deployed on this side and had got someone onto that hill on turn 1, they would have left nowhere for him to hide in that way. So again, I think this side was a much better side to be on for the orcs, particularly, almost to deny these kind of things for the Empire. Um, and then the cavalry didn't move up. I don't think that's their maximum move. Maybe it is with the wheel, but no, I think they could have moved a bit further. And very interestingly, chose to not go on the hill, which I kind of don't like because he's going to be out of a long range. I'd like to have poked one guy onto the hill just to give them good vision. Um, there's not really any shooting to be scared of. Like even the fireball doesn't do anything to them because they've got massive armor. I mean, again, you could always get very unlucky, but you know, if someone's going to choose to fireball something and they're going to choose my most heavily armored knights, right? Yeah, go for it. Like that's the best thing for me to get targeted, really. So yeah, I think Rob should have been maybe a little bit more gung ho with these knights because they're pretty tough. But yeah, they're still in a good situation because they're out here on the flank, which again, as I said on my last battle report, using your Goblin Raiders, getting them around the flanks is really critical. Whereas like, yeah, they're not in a great situation here really for Hyper G. But I think what he's doing is from his position that he ended up in, he's kept them at long range from those gunners, and I can kind of see what he was doing. He's kind of trying to make the best of the situation he's in there. But yeah, maybe not ideal. Rob's magic phase now. Trying to recall what went off in this one. I think he just gets off. Yeah, sorry, he gets off a scorching salvo. That's right. I think he put all his dice into it, or most. I think yeah, I think he got the 4-2 card, and I think he put all 4 dice in, and yeah, rolled so high that it was not impossible for Hyper-G to stop it. So again, this is one thing is if you've only got 2 spells like this, and one of them's not particularly useful to you, you might as well put all your dice or a large number of your dice into one spell, and Rob smartly does that. Um, and he is within range of both these units, and they both take a bit of damage. So yeah, one of the things that makes Scorching Salvo not super deadly though is that it obviously doesn't do a lot of damage to any one unit. But you know, it's whittling them down, 2 goblins down, 1 orc down, and as I said earlier, every casualty can count. So yeah, not a great start for the orcs there. Um, we're measuring the ranges. Yeah, just in long range for this one. And yeah, and of course, as I said, these guys do not like to be shot by handguns. So let's see how this goes. There, 2 of them get wiped out, and that's pretty average to be honest. They're not that great. So you already lost like a lot of unit, but a fantastic discipline roll of only 4. So they did not panic off, and that was due to the good positioning of the general there. So Hyper G again, not in an ideal situation, but making a good play out of what he had, I guess, there by keeping them within range of the general to hopefully not get them panicked, and it worked out for him. But yeah, 3 Goblin Raiders, meh, not great, right? So on to Hyper-G's next movement phase, turn 2. Here we go. Uh, let's see what he does. Yeah, again, a very cagey little movement there. Again, this was like a wheel and wheel back again with these raiders. The one good thing about being only 3 wide is it does become easier and easier to wheel the smaller width you have. So little maneuvers like this become a little bit easier to do. But again, he's keeping them only moving up to their 9-inch non-march range. Their advanced move is what the words I'm looking for. To go through this wood without taking any dangerous terrain tests, and keeping them at long range, and obviously keeping them long charges over here. So again, so this movement is good. He has managed to separate the goblins and the orcs a little bit. Again, I think it was a little bit tricky for him to move around. He's also got a view here. You can see the arc of the orcs is seeing these cavalry. And again, this is why I would have kind of liked them to be on the hill because yeah, it's just nice. He unfortunately obviously cannot escape this scorching salvo. It's one reason it's so good in Essence of War because of the objective nature of this game. And it's 18-inch range. It's like out to here or something. I mean, maybe no, it doesn't. It's not quite getting the raiders from here, but like it's such an enormous zone when if you put a circle of 18 inches on this board, it's like it's almost like it looks like it's like 2/3 of the board. I mean, it probably isn't quite, but it feels like it is. It's almost inescapable, which is really quite good. But again, he's just positioning. Again, I would have personally think if you're going to play Orcs and Goblins in this matchup, right? It's all about the matchups. These guys do have the missile fire advantage. The longer this game, longer they stand off, like it's slightly to the advantage of the Empire, I feel. Um, but yeah, still, it's not no disasters here whatsoever. And again, keeping the Raiders back, even though it's not great. Another option might have been to try and wheel round, do an 18-inch move, try and get over this flank here. I quite like that one, but then you're so vulnerable with only 3 left, and that would obviously keep. I think they've managed to keep within the generals here. Yeah, I think that's what he was doing, was trying to keep them over here. Again, it's making the best of a bad situation, and I mean, I guess it is pulling fire. So at the very least, like he's kind of forcing the Empire to deal with the Goblin Raiders. So not terrible. If you've got a unit that's a little bit vulnerable, not very useful, potentially in the rest of the battle, at least make them a thorn in your opponent's side, right? So I kind of like that. Onto the magic phase. I think we get another 4 dice to 2, if I remember correctly. Yeah, we do. So we couldn't 5 dice this one, but we could 4 dice it, and you could get a triple there, by the way. So yeah, there's a triple 3. So he gets off Awaken the Beast on the Hawks, but obviously it's only turn 2 here, and he loses the spell, which is a real disaster. Probably would have rather took some hits in that situation on the wizard than lose the spell, because yeah, Awaken the Beast off on this turn isn't even particularly useful. Um, and he used all his dice on it. So actually, weirdly, this might have been one of the phases to risk it. And as I say, if you don't have a critical spell to get off, right, that might be the good time to instead split your dice, and just see, try and get lucky, and maybe you get 2 spells through, maybe you get one, or maybe you still get one off anyway, but maybe your opponent gets to control which one, but maybe you don't care because like. Yeah, I don't know. I might have been tempted to just split the 4 dice there into a fireball and awaken the beast. But in any case, he's got Awaken the Beast off, but that's going to be the last Awaken the Beast of this battle, unfortunately, for the Orcs and Goblins. So, yeah, there we go. And so, yeah, on to Rob's turn 2. Um, let's see what he does. He moves up like this, so no movement at all from the Imperial Guard, which, again, I can kind of see why. However, this movement, it it sort of looks good on paper, but I'm not sure I like it. Now he's got out of the arc of these orcs, great. But if you look at the angle he's put himself in, his front arc here is like pointing over to this like back edge of the board, and you might be thinking what I'm thinking, which is any forward movement from these 2 units, which they're probably going to want to do as we get towards turn 2, 3, and 4 to get into this objective area. These knights are going to end up with nothing to charge, which is I mean, maybe they don't want to charge anyway, but again, with these raiders, it's all about making yourself a threat. So I think this movement is a bit weird. Like, yeah, honestly almost would have preferred them just to be back here on the hill with like one of them looking over the hill to be able to see out and make charges. Um, yeah, they're just not doing very much for me over here. Um, but we'll see how this pans out for Rob anyway. Does get a magic phase off. Um, Can't recall exactly what he tries to do. Um, but let's have a quick look at some notes. Um, oh, there was a failed attempt at casting the salvo. So he did try to cast the salvo again, but did not roll high enough. 3 dice? No, I guess he just must have fluffed it or not used all his dice. Any case, there was no magic to be spoken of, and the handgunners decide to take shots at the raiders again. Again, this time they're a little bit harder to hit though because they are in the wood, so there is that, and they are still at long range. So again, being a pain, manages to kill one of them, but excuse me, skipping back and forth there. Once again, keeping within that general's range, discipline 8, rolls a 7. So Hyper G, like me, seems to like to low roll his dice. I'm sure he doesn't like to do that. But yeah, the one advantage if you're a low roller is you somehow get these really low rolls on discipline checks as well sometimes, which is what happens to me. So weirdly similar there. In terms of dice rolling style. There we go. So yeah, there is only 2 of them left, but yeah, he took the cash off there to make sure he could stay within range of the generals. Discipline, which proved to be strong there. So Hyper G's turn 3, and he did exactly what I was thought he was going to do, which was move forward, leaving these knights looking at nobody. Just again, if they'd been back here facing up the board, then these orcs couldn't move like this, and they'd have been forced to twist over here maybe, and making it even harder for them to get into the zone. So these knights have sort of countered themselves here, especially when you've only got 4 turns. Like every little bit of movement is so critical in Essence of War, which is why it's designed that way. Again, it's to kind of teach you the full game of Fantasy Battles Ninth Age as well, and it's secretly teaching you all those tricks. But yeah, so movement very critical in this kind of game, and yeah, and of course that's the one thing one of the few things you absolutely fully control. So whilst it is a dice game and it can feel a bit, a bit random at times. Things can go against me. The one thing you have like full control over is the movement and positioning exactly of your army. So if you make a mistake there, that's all on you basically. So yeah, he's kind of escaped. Got them both within the central zone here. I believe these raiders are just outside the zone, but I think they're just within range again. He's trying to keep them around, just being a pain here. Again, I think he thought about charging. But he would have had to take terrain tests for going through the woods, which is not great when you've only got 2 of you left. And as Hyper G astutely pointed out, 2 raiders probably can't even do very much to these handgunners, to be honest. I mean, even if they get them in the flank now, there's only 2 of them left. It's dicey. I mean, they can get the flank bonuses, which is nice. But anything that's going to be steadfast and things like that, I mean, and also just damage them back, yeah, they're almost useless, but they're a unit. They can still score. They've not run away, so don't knock them there. They're still around, being a pain. So it's good play actually, in terms of like making the best of a bad situation, as we said earlier. And I do like this aggressive move. This I kind of again I said I would have maybe liked to see a bit more moving forward. I wonder if again I think these units might have been so close it might have been quite tricky. I wonder if the goblins could have got further out. I'd have liked the goblins further over this way if there was any way to do that, because I'll say my Orcs versus Imperial Guard. I love that fight. Whereas Orcs versus Orcs versus Imperial Guard I like that. Goblins versus Imperial Guard I do not like. They would almost certainly lose to them, and they've lost a few guys already. So their main saving grace will be if they can keep steadfast by having more ranks. That's the lines of fighters, yeah. More ranks than the opponent, they can keep steadfast, and then the goblins are all right. But if they lose steadfast, their discipline is very low, even with the general around. So yeah, a little bit of a risky one, that one. Maybe this movement maybe could have been a little bit better from the Orc and Goblin side as well. Um, Moving on, Hyper G, once again, 5 dices, a fireball, if I remember correctly, and does in fact get another miscast. So that's actually pretty unlucky. So he's done a 5 dice, a 4 dice, and a 5 dice, and he's had 2 miscasts. And like, even on a 5 dice, your chance of miscasting, I think is about 20%, maybe 21%, something like that. So it's only like 1 in 5. So if if you 5 dice every turn of the game, you probably should get a miscast, right? But he's also 4 diced on 1 turn, and he's got 2 miscasts, which is just like, yeah, that's just very unlucky. Although I seem to remember, he only takes 1 hit from it, so 1 health point lost from the Orc Shaman on that miscast, which, whatever. He's probably not really bothered. Like even if he dies in the combat, it's still he's no easier or harder to kill. I don't think. Maybe he's slightly easier to damage than the guys around him, but there's not much in it. Like he's an Orc, whatever, in a unit of Orcs. The fireball, however, was targeted at the light infantry, which is again a great target. If you can get goblin bow shots and fireball shots off, the orcs do have some shooting power back, but the main target they can really hurt is these light infantry because they've got no armor. But the orc missile and the orc fireball, the goblin bows and the orc shaman's fireball have no armor penetration, so they're pretty weak against everything else, but they're also pretty good against these infantry. Rolls a 3 on that's 4 hits and kills 3 of them. That is a panic check, and rolls a 9. So this trade-off for Hyperg is very happy about this one. He's got off the fireball, does take the miscast, takes a hit point, but he'll definitely take that to panic these handgunners. And they actually move another 8 inches away, and that movement is huge now because this is turn 3, and they already calculated even if they rally, turn around, and then the last turn move another 8 inches back in, they cannot get to score now. So that unit is essentially out of the game, but just for that 1 fireball. So a huge magic phase there for the Orcs and Goblins. Very, very, very good for them. And then we move into the final. Yeah, sorry, that was the distance that they were fleeing. Oh no, sorry. We are into Rob's turn. I'm getting on the end. Does declare a charge. Our first charge of the battle here, guys, on turn 3, bottom of turn 3. The Empire Imperial Guard decided to charge the goblins, and that charge, I believe he only needed an 8, and he got it. So yeah, pretty again, this positioning of the goblins, if you could have forced it back a little bit, or maybe a little bit this way, would have been a lot safer because you really wanted to force these guys to want to charge the orcs, not the goblins. Would have been the key if I was the orc and goblin player thinking about that one. I want my orc kind of goblins hiding a bit back really. Um, but yeah, it's still it's not going too bad here for the orcs and goblins. It's looking all right. But yeah, that charge, very good, very fortunate for Rob there. They got in. And even better, right? Because what he manages to do by so there's a rule when you get into combat in Ninth Age and in Essence of War, you have to maximize your contact, but you are allowed to do this. So this has got all 5 goblins fighting and all 5 Imperial Guard fighting. So this is a legal positioning for this charge, but he's managed to keep them out of line of sight of the orcs. So even if this combat is a push and no one runs away, the orcs will not be able to charge the Imperial Guard next turn. So he's left the orcs with no charges, which is tremendous. Again, orcs and goblins positioning here. These units weren't, because they're facing like apart from each other. They can't. You want units kind of facing towards each other a little bit, and that way they can kind of defend each other's flanks. This way they're kind of like can't protect each other basically very well because the way the rules work. So yeah, not ideal there, but great little maneuver there from Rob. Gets the charge in and gets out of line of sight. Um, he does have to consider what to do with his knights though. So he does manage to rally the light infantry. So they turn around, but they can't shoot or do very much this turn. But maybe on the final turn they'll be able to take some shots. And he decides to do this with his cavalry, which is probably again it's a bit of a best of a bad situation kind of thing. I don't mind that, so I just get that movement there. But again, I don't really know what else they could have done, so I guess that's okay. We are getting into the magic phase here. He manages to roll a corruption of 10 on a very high roll. And did he manage to get off a salvo? Oh no, I think it was dispelled. Anyway, he only managed to get off. I think yeah, that was it. I was interested on this one actually because Rob did decide to split his dice. He had I think it's 6 dice to 3, something like that. 6 dice to 4. And I don't know. It's a tricky one, actually. I guess looking at the battle again now, I was sort of surprised. I was like, no, you always go for Scorching Salvo. Don't worry about Corruption of Tin very much against the Orcs and Goblins. But in this situation, what was the Scorching Salvo really going to do? It might kill a few Orcs, but that's it. So it's probably not very relevant. So yeah, I guess it does make sense to split the dice and but yeah, the corruption tin is off on the goblins, but it doesn't make a huge amount of difference because they don't have amazing armor anyway. But they have armor 2 and the Imperial Guard have armor penetration 1, and then the corruption tin means they've got 0 armor. So it does help a little bit, but not, they would have only had 1 point of armor anyway. And you can see the knights wheeling around the back here. There we go. The Imperial Guard do strike first on the charge, kill 3 goblins, which is about right, about average, I think. But very importantly, strips them of a rank there, so they are now equal on ranks, which means neither side is steadfast. And Hyper G got a loads of hits with his goblins, and then needed a 4 to damage. And you can see this 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3. Oh no, goblin combat, guys. This is what this is what they're about. So very unfortunate there. Probably should have got 1 or 2. But in the end, loses this combat by a fair margin. So he's got, I won't calculate it all now, but yeah, loses combat by a fair amount and does break. Rob had a real think about this one. Did he want to pursue or not? Because the central zone, in the end, because he was like more towards the middle of the central zone, he did decide to pursue. However, the goblins rolled a fair bit further, as you can see, than the Imperial Guard. But the Imperial Guard were quite lucky in that they did manage to remain within the zone. So, I mean, they'd be able to reform, even though they've got to face and chase like the way they went. So, again, I might not have taken that because they were cleverly positioned right back here outside the arc of the orcs, and they wouldn't have been able to be charged by anyone anyway. I guess again, this was a very friendly game, so I'm not sure either of these players was like playing, to really pushing every single rule to the limit or anything like that, trying to win. So not going to be too harsh on them. But yeah, it was an interesting decision either way. But wanted to chase down those goblins, didn't make it. The goblins end up in a really annoying spot here though, which we'll see why. However, there was another big problem with this. Goblins aren't insignificant in Essence of War, and the orcs had to take a panic test. Now, Hyper G has been very good on panic rolls all game long, but not this time. The orcs also panic, which is a big disaster, because this was going to be a tie or possibly a win, maybe to the orcs at this point, but then the orcs panic and flee like that. A real big disaster for Hyper G, because now can't really do very much. However, as we shall see, positioning of these fleeing goblins proves critical. And the first thing Hyper G does in his turn, which is coming up next, this was the end of Rob's turn here, right? He has to rally, right? And he chooses quite wisely to rally the orcs first, because then if he rallies that, the general can be positioned over here and can also then get a better chance of rallying the goblins. And he rolls a double one! So yeah, the low rolling skills of Hyper G here once again rallies the orcs and now can make a discipline 8 rather than discipline 6 rally check on the goblins, and they also rally. So the fact they don't flee off further means this ridiculously annoying position, right? Because these knights cannot wheel past them. So there's no way for these knights. Again, this position of this knights at the back looked okay, but I guess we should have. I mean, I'm not very good at this, to be honest. Like, considering flee paths and where units will run to should they run, right? Actually, again, these wanted to be well clear of these goblins, right, to make sure they could move or charge something in the center of the board. Whereas because of the way he's been and they've gone into that flea arc has just cut them off. So, so yeah, although Rob's got all these units left, can't really do much with them that would relevant to the objective in the last turn. So the only unit that's actually in play for the objective in the final turn is going to be the Imperial Guard. So the Orcs rally, but they can't now move. They can turn around. The Goblins rally. All they can do is turn around. But the one thing Hyper G, the one unit left, the one unit that we talk about all game has been hanging around. They're now critical to this objective game in the last turn. So Hyper G does in fact wheel them round. I believe he only goes the 9 inches. Yeah, looks about right. 9 inches gets them to here to get them right in the middle of the objective. Remember, these guys are facing off this way. These guys can't get him, but it's all coming down to the shooting, so it's really ridiculously close here in the last turn. Had those orcs not panicked, then obviously this could have been a much different game. Although, I mean, I have to say, the amount of discipline checks that Rob forced, there was obviously a bunch of them, and eventually you're going to fail one if you keep forcing discipline checks. That's generally the idea of the game, is to keep forcing them, and eventually your opponent will fail one, like no matter how lucky they seem to be getting. And so this was just unfortunate for Hyper G. That happened right at the end of the game, and his orcs would have been here scoring, but they're just running away because these stupid goblins went and ran off, and they got a bit flustered. But yeah, puts them in, so it's all going to come down on the last turn to the spells and shooting of the Empire. If they can deal with the Goblin Raiders, who aren't the toughest nuts to crack, then it will be all over. So he does roll a big magic phase, and he rolls a Scorching Salvo. Oh, hang on. Oh no, sorry, we're still in the Orc phase here. Yeah, actually, yes. One more play, actually, unfortunately. One more play here for Hyper G. He does have to, he could rally. He can cast spells on the turn you rally. That's the one I was forgetting. So, yeah, does offer Mighty Fireball. 4 dice Fireball. Was it 5 dice? Yeah, 5 dice Fireball against 4. And Rob fails to dispel it. Goes on the Imperial Guard. And he gets 4 hits on them. So D3 plus 1 there, 3 plus 1, 4. He has to kill 3 to force a panic check, but he only gets 1. So had these Imperial Guard panicked, right, again, that could have been critical, maybe won the game, potentially, or potentially tied the game for Hyper G. So great move. Both of them eking out every last little bit thing they can get. Not to be, though. Right, on the last turn, Rob does decide to charge the knights into the goblins. It's kind of irrelevant for the game because the objective can't be won by either of these units anyway. Although Hyper G they didn't realise actually that there was a very small chance the goblins would win this fight, panic the knights, So break the knights, which could then panic the Imperial Guards. Actually, if you're playing in the strictest maximum play to win like style, you probably shouldn't have done this. But I think Rob maybe just went, nah, whatever. I'm gonna go in anyway. The knights are gonna lose some goblins in the flank right anyway, so it's probably all fine. Um, and that's the positioning then. So again, these guys can just spin around, but they can't do any. I mean, sorry, these guys are in the objective anyway. These guys couldn't maneuver apart from charging the goblins, so that's what they did. These guys are just looking onwards, hoping to shoot these guys, and the wizard can get them within, doesn't need line of sight anyway. So there we go. I think that's rolling. Can't remember what that was. We're not worried about that. Oh, he's rolling a Scorching Salvo. That's right. So he does get off a Scorching Salvo. He does hit the Orcs with a bunch of hits, kills a couple of them, but not relevant to the battle really. And the big one, 4 hits on the Goblin Raiders. It's not looking good for our heroic goblins, and it's looking even worse now because they get wiped out by that. So yeah, there we go. End of the game. That's the objective. It is a 1-0 victory to the Empire Sonnenstahl. So yeah, really good play actually. Really fun to watch this one. As I say, you can probably still find the archive on Twitch right now, and I believe Proxy Table Gaming might be putting up the full length, like every single bit with all the chat and everything. So I'll put links to those if they are still around, if they happen on the Proxy Table Gaming channel. If not, you'll just have to make do with my battle report on these two opponents. Hopefully they will not be too upset with my harsh criticisms of their play. But yeah, but I just wanted to see what you make of this one, guys. It's a bit weird trying to do a battle report on someone else, but I guess it's not that different because you're always kind of battle report from you and your opponent, so you're always trying to think through what your opponent might have been doing and thinking, unless they told you. So hopefully this isn't too bad a way of doing it. I have gone massively over time here. Sorry about that one. I'll see how quick I could make it. The answer is not very quick. But yeah, let me know what you make of this, and I will be back for some more another time. Bye!